Hi, everyone. It's Annie, your local real estate agent in central Massachusetts. I'm here with our monthly market report for December, and this is our last monthly market report of this year. So I just want to say a quick thank you to all of you that have been watching each month. So to get started here, we're going to talk about what is coming up in real estate market over the winter. You know, in a normal market, most listings would be coming onto the market in the second quarter of each year. So think of that as the spring market. And that's April, May, June highlighted here. But the reality is, you know, this market is anything but normal, as we've been saying for a while. So we're just going to throw out that answer the second quarter of each year. And I'm going to show you over the next few minutes why we're going to see more listings this winter than we would any other time of this year. So the reality of the pandemic and coming out of the last couple of years is that seasonality in the real estate market has kind of just been thrown out the window. Let's start here. Home sellers have historically moved when something in their lives changed. A new baby, a marriage, divorce, or a new job. And this comes from Jessica Lautz, the Vice President of Demographics at NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors. She goes on to say the pandemic has impacted everyone, and for many, this became an impetus to sell and make a housing trade. So no doubt the seasonality, all of these things that used to drive real estate sales still do in some respect, but the pandemic caused a lot of people to say, we need something different in a home, and we're seeing the results of that. It goes on to say the pandemic likely spurred occupants to shorten their home stay as tenure in the home decreased to 8 years from 10 years, according to the report. This is the largest single year change in home tenure since NAR began collecting such data. They used to say somebody moved every 5-6 years, but you go through the housing crisis, and after 2008, tenure in homes began to rise. And what we're seeing in this new report is that tenure has started to come down. So here's what that looks like graphically. Going all the way back to 1985, you see the average of about 6 years of someone staying in their home. Go through the housing crisis, people stay in their homes longer, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. The average just over 9 years in a home over the last, call it 10 or so years. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. A lot of people maybe didn't have the equity to make a move. Maybe they were underwater for a while in the home that they own. Maybe they just said, you know, we're not going to do anything right now. We're going to try and pay this house off and stay here because we saw what happened to people during the housing crisis in 2008. Now, coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing that dip down. And I'm certainly not saying that 1 year would make a trend by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we can say that it represents pent-up seller demand in all of those years that people stayed in their homes. We can say that the meaning of home has dramatically changed. We can say there is more equity in homes today than there ever has been before. And all of this leading to many people thinking is now the time to make a move. And I do believe that we're going to start to see that in the winter. Let's take a look at what George Braytu at Realtor.com says. He said, the pandemic has delayed plans for many Americans and homeowners looking to move on to the next stage of life, and that's no exception. Recent survey data suggests the majority of prospective sellers are actively preparing to enter the market this winter. And in that study, 65% said they have either just listed or plan to list this winter. 93% say they've already taken the steps towards listing their home, including working with an agent. 36% have researched the value of their home and others in the neighborhood, as well as started making repairs or doing what they need to do to sell their home. And I think today in this market, being prepared, being educated, and taking action is key. Danielle Hale says listings rose for the second week in a row, with the recent survey data suggesting that a growing share of homeowners and potential sellers are eager to find new homes. There is reason to believe this may be the start of the welcome trend, especially as we move into colder months. As we look into this winter, I think we're going to see more activity among sellers and among buyers than we've seen in quite some time. We've had 2 phenomenal years in real estate, and I expect another great year with a lot of business over the winter. So let's just take a minute to talk about interest rates, probably one of the biggest updates or topics that's going to be talked about as we go into the new year. The overall outlook outlook is interest rates are going to rise. This is a look right now at the 30-year fixed, and we look at January of 2020 prior to the pandemic. We were close to that 4%. Right now, the average 30-year fixed is 3.1%, with many people calling for a rise going into the next year. And this is the historical perspective on interest rates, looking at 2016, 17, 18, 19 for what I'm going to call normal years in real estate. And we balance somewhere between 3.5% and 5%. I think we're headed back there in that direction. I think we're headed back into a much more normal interest rate environment. We've seen some phenomenal rates over the last year or so, historically low rates on a 30-year fixed. And I think we're going to head back into a time where we were prior to the pandemic. You may be wondering, what's the impact of rising rates on home prices and home sales? Well, our research team went back and took a look at the impact on rising interest rate environment and home prices and home sales. Home prices are slightly impacted by rising mortgage rates. This is a look going all the way back to 2000. And what you see in the line graph there is interest rates. And what you see in the bar graph is appreciation or depreciation during the housing crisis. The quick thing I want to point out is in each rising interest rate environment, there is no depreciation, except for during that housing crisis. And we see when you start to look at rising interest rate environments, the first one around 2005, you see less appreciation in 2006. You look at kind of 2012, 2013, 2014, rising interest rate environment with less appreciation the last year. And then the next one in 2016, 17, and 18, we go up and come back down a little bit. So a slight impact in home price appreciation. And price appreciation, though, as we look at that, is resistant to rising mortgage rates. And here's why. Mark Fleming, I think, sums this up the best. He says home price appreciation is resistant to rising mortgage rates, primarily because most sellers would rather withdraw from the market than sell at a lower price, a phenomenon we refer to as downside sticky. So we don't see depreciation in market, maybe prices slightly impacted by rising interest rates. The other question is home sales. Are they going to be impacted by the rising interest rates? And if you go all the way back to 1999, which is what you see in this graphic, where we have the interest rates in line graph and home sales in the bar graph, we can see the home sales aren't impacted by rising mortgage rates. Now, I won't walk you through each scenario. You can see here each one of the red bars being rising interest rate environments, and they're not corresponding with the lower home sales. So the bottom line here is that context matters right now for the housing market and certainly for purchasing demand. The economy is improving. Millennials are continuing to age into their prime home buying years in large numbers. So that context remains good for the housing market. I think overall, as we look at that, we can expect a rising interest rate environment going into next year. I don't see that affecting the housing market dramatically. It will cost more to buy a home as we go through that. And I think that you should expect that as we go throughout the next several months and next year. So I'm going to leave you with that today. The Winter 2022 buyer and seller guides are available now. This guide is going to equip you with everything you need to know to make a powerful and confident decision for you and your family. Is now the right time to buy? Is now the right time for you to sell and move on? Email me for a copy of these guides at AnnieOakmanRealty@gmail.com.